Yeah.
Good morning and welcome. It's pretty that we're in a year where we've completed year 4. We do the 23rd. Most of you were around and started the program. Just it's 90 seconds to review before we get started. About 5 years ago, Thanksgiving time, in Beaver, we were really thinking hard about how we make great problem solving work in all classrooms and not just in our schools or the theater. We were creative solving, we were creative problem solving for science and math, history. And at that time, I was a mutual acquaintance, a mutual friend, introduced me to Saeed who's not here today, so we're graduating, which is the kids, right? We're graduating today, and he had an idea for a program that was, absolutely in sync with what we were trying to accomplish. We were back to the office one day, and at my desk I had signs of the technology book, something about design. While he was reading the same book, so to see and we had that connection. So we got that was around Thanksgiving time in March. We got a pilot program going with seniors. We thought maybe seniors would be a low risk endeavor for us. And it turned out we got 89 seniors. We did that in the studio pilot right here in campus in the art studio. About 8 kids did it, and it was a huge success. And it really began to catch on. The school one day they were doing a balloon out, and they were out there in the field with these balloons of the air with the camera on what's going on. And so we were curious to do the program to introduce us to the school at April, and I was families applied for 60 spots, and then in September we were up and going. For us, we saw this as a great opportunity for kids to do open-ended, non-linear learning, non-linear problem solving, looking at real-world problems, all the skills that we're trying to instill in kids today, collaboration, collaboration. It all take place in this program, an opportunity for kids to be exposed to the enormous resources that are out there, particularly in the Harvard IT community. And so now we're going to 20 kids return attending. And it's had a great, it's a really nice back and forth. We were actually Beaver, the best example of the initiative Rob actually found us that actually taught us to but I noticed that kids would be in the studio and coaches that they're all involved something that would tell kids to just stop and go to a program to move forward with this project. And kids to it's okay, just programming. I don't know that. So yeah, I use my demonstration to high school. So that made us think something from that, and I think as a result of all this too, it became more cooperation and collaboration in the classroom, and problem solving in the classroom, so day-to-day lives. Just 4.5 years we do. I mentioned Saeed at the time, and Saeed and I talked about watching YouTube style that was out in San Francisco, and this is happening, and it reached must have already read this when we were in San Francisco, Cambridge, and actually spent some time over 8 years in India too, so this is a challenge that we're starting. It's how is the great officer, and so the state is chief executive officer, which is something explain what you can tell about.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. I know it was a little bit of a shock to come out As Peter mentioned, my name is Sabah Boulay, and I'm the Chief Creative Officer for NuVu Studio. It's almost a little hard to believe that this is actually our 4th year that we've been doing this in a wonderful partnership that we've had with Beaver Country Day. So a little bit about the program, and then we'll go to a Q&A. NuVu Studio is an innovation center for middle and high school students. We almost like to think about it as, if you imagine the media lab at the MIT combined with an architecture studio model, and if they sort of had a baby, it would be NuVu, and that's kind of the way we like to think about it. It's a studio-based learning model where students actually work collaboratively on hands-on projects. And we try to bring in amazing mentors to help guide them through this very open-ended process of taking some of their ideas and actually turning them into real projects. This is a snapshot here of our studio space in Cambridge. We're located in Central Square between MIT and Harvard. I'm an MIT alum, and both of my other co-founders, Farida and David Wang, were also MIT graduates. David's formation is PhD at MIT. So a lot of the inspiration actually came from actually seeing students at MIT working collaboratively in a hands-on environment and actually bringing in elements of different types of technologies that are pertinent in the world today and actually using them to solve big world problems. So as you can see, the studio is sort of a very open space. There's many things happening at the same time, so we have multiple studios that run simultaneously, but the entire culture is really built around making and building and a very hands-on environment. We have a tool shop in the back of our studio where we have a lot of tools such as laser cutters, 3D printers, everything that we might need for a lot of electronics-related projects, but it's a very intensive culture of hands-on making, and we really try to support the students as much as possible to get their ideas, very rough ideas that we might have, and actually turn them into tangible products. Our main focus, we like to think of it as our big 3 C's. The most important being creativity. Our focus is really on the creative process and students learning how to take something that's in their brains and actually turning it into something. The second piece is the collaboration piece. All the projects that the students work on are all team-based projects in small teams, so they'll work in groups of 2 to 3 to 4. And really to help understand the idea of bringing different perspectives are really critical to any big problem solving. And the third piece is the communication piece. So students in our studio really learn how to communicate their ideas. So we have bi-weekly presentation reviews where our students present in front of their audience and we bring in reviewers. And they get an opportunity to actually share what their entire process has been and synthesize all of their learning in front of their audience. So these are our 3 big elements that we focus on. Going back to the creative process, which is sort of the center point of our model, every studio that we have is basically based around this really strong design thinking process. And some of you might be familiar with this, depending on what industry you're coming from, but it's really about nurturing the students and guiding them through this very open-ended process. So they'll be given a design brief and look at a problem and all the sort of big constraints and objectives. And then there'll be a moment of framing the issue. And so ask them, like, what are the big questions which are driving these big issues? And usually the coach is really involved in this process. And there's usually a lot of inspiration looking at relevant projects that might be important and pertinent. And then it really focuses on the process itself, which is about making it, iterating, and designing. So taking that prototype that you have and getting feedback from your mentors and outside reviewers and constantly making that product better. And that's usually what takes up most of the studio time. And at the end of this design review process is a big final review, as I mentioned, where we bring in outside reviewers and the students get to present one last time. So this whole culture is really built around iterating and taking that prototype that you have and constantly fixing it, making it better, revising, getting feedback, revising, and getting feedback. Really emulating what you see in the real world process. As Peter mentioned, one of the big differences between NuVu and traditional sort of learning environment would be that our teachers, we call them coaches, are actually people who are professionals working in the field. And so they'll come for a period of 2 weeks and actually work full-time with the students from 9 to 3, Monday through Friday, and bring in their real-world expertise. And this is really an exciting piece of the program because the students actually get to connect with people who are actually working in this industry. So in the past, we've had people who have been filmmakers, roboticists, entrepreneurs, we've had musicians, we've had a lot of our PhD students who come in to Harvard. So it's really an exciting space also for the coaches to come and work for a period of time with the students and actually bring their sort of own creative process and share that with the students as well. This is sort of a very typical scene that you'll see in our studio, or what we like to call a desk break, which is you'll have the coach sitting with each of the student teams, giving them feedback along their process, and this sort of happens continuously during the course of the day and throughout the trimester. The other piece which sort of differentiates NuVu from a typical school environment is the way that we actually structure our trimesters. So we have themes which guide all the studios that we do. So we have themes from government, food, smarter planet, health, mobile technologies, and these actually guide the 2 week studios in the way that we design our curriculum. Our trimester, unlike a regular schooling environment, is actually broken down into these 2 week studios, where students get to focus on one single project for a period of 2 weeks, and after that period of time, they'll move on to another studio, which is based around another studio topic. And in that way, they're constantly going through this creative process and actually iterating on their own design methodology and how do I get better at solving problems. And at the end of the trimester, we have an independent project period, which is actually where we're at right now in our trimester, where the students actually initiate their own project, they finish up prior projects, and they also finalize their portfolio, which is an online portfolio piece, which showcases and brings together all the projects that they've worked on over the course of the past 3 months. And we also have a big exhibit at the end, a public exhibit, where about 200 people come and attend, and the students actually get to present in front of the audience as well. So this is basically how our trimester is structured. To give you a better idea, so what are the types of projects that the students actually work on? Well, they work on a pretty diverse range of stuff, and this is just a very small snapshot of the types of projects that the students will do. And mind you, these are all 2 week studios. So you can see that they get to some level of pretty complex problem solving. So this is a studio called Telepresence Robots, and the idea for the studio actually came from one of our coaches who actually spends part of his time in San Francisco and part of his time in Cambridge working at our studio, and he needed a way to actually communicate with our students when he was in San Francisco. So we thought, well, let's design a telepresence robot that could be useful for him as well as other coaches and others who might be somewhere off-site but still wanted a means to communicate with the students. So the students brainstormed a bunch of different ideas, and this was actually a giant collective group project. So there was 12 students working on this project together. And you can sort of see all the components that they designed for this telepresence robot. But essentially, what someone can do is the coach can come on Skype. Right now, there's like an avatar face, so if the coach is really grumpy early in the morning, you can kind of hide himself and take a happy smile. He can basically come on, communicate with the students, and he can actually control the telepresence robot through a keyboard, and they had actually made it so it's a gesture-controlled device using leap motion. The students work in the process of designing it, programming it, creating a certain lighting scheme. And so you can see it's a very, very, very real-world problem. And you can see sort of the robot moving around and the students showcasing it at the final exhibit. We've had studios around new music technology, new musical instruments, and this was a project that the students worked on, which was to design, some type of interactive musical instrument. And the students really have this interesting idea. Well, let's make an instrument that actually allows for collaborative music production. So one of the students actually was wearing this glove, and through gesture controls, you could actually change the tuning of certain instruments and sounds that were being played. And the MIDI keyboard, you would actually play on the MIDI keyboard, and it would light up this sort of chandelier keyboard that would come from the ceiling. And there would be another person who would be also manipulating sounds in another way. So you can see that they basically came up with this idea for this project. And really our job as a team is to support the students along taking that idea and actually making it into something. We also do a lot of sort of filmmaking projects, always looking at kind of the bigger problems. So this was a studio around visualizing food and looking at the health industry and the effects of food on health and disease. And so the students really wanted to make some sort of a animated infomercial around food and its effects on on the rise of certain types of diseases. So they actually created this little video. And it's a pretty amazing video. You can see sort of their storyboard, where they started from, and then starting to take their storyboard and create these animations in After Effects. And a lot of 3D modeling work took place in 3D Studio Max, which is a 3D modeling program. And you can see the level of kind of finesse to the final piece. And really, the ideas for all the students, the first couple of days are very intensive, where they spend some time storyboarding and getting feedback from their coaches. And then the rest of almost the 7 days are really spent on production, editing, and kind of composing that entire piece. And you can see the sort of final visual that they created. We've done a lot of studios around designing apps that can be played on various types of tablets. This was an app actually that could be combined with an EEG headset to monitor your brainwaves. So this was actually an app that a bunch of students designed, a storytelling app which had interactive elements. So they could read the mood of the person who might be reading the story, and then take that information and be changing sort of the visuals that might be displayed on the screen. There were elements of interaction as far as taking photographs, and integrating those photographs back into the app so that the story would become personalized. So really looking at sort of the technologies that we now have as part of sort of apps and tablets and smartphones, and integrating that into the narrative process as well. We've done a lot of sort of interactive gaming studios using different types of sensors, such as the Kinect sensor. And what's really exciting about some of these projects is you'll have a team of students that might work on it for a period of 2 weeks, and another group of students that might be really excited about that project, and they'll continue to sort of iterate and design on it. And this is sort of a perfect example of this type of project. This is called the IMAT, and it was sort of this interactive gaming platform. So you can see these students are sort of painting a scene as they're playing soccer. So there was a group of students who actually designed the game, and others who sort of built upon that game and designed other games using that same platform that the students had built. So there's a lot of sort of collaboration. What we try and really focus on is, that you might have an idea, but how to make it better, and really focus on that rather than thinking about, this is just, my idea, and there's a sense of like ownership about it, but actually to share what you have, that knowledge, and get it out, and then have others sort of critique it to make that idea even better. We also have some really exciting partnerships through these 2-week studios. So this was a studio that was kind of focused around robotics, but we actually partnered with a new startup called Rise Robotics in Cambridge, and they're a really young startup. And they have this new product, which is called, sort of a version of an linear actuator. And so they actually wanted to test out the capabilities of the linear actuator, and they said, hey, can we kind of run a studio and see what ideas the students come up with for our product? And so they did, and so the coaches came, and every day they would kind of work with the students, and the students would sort of push the limits of the product and break, in most cases, break linear actuators by the end of the day around 3 p.m. And then the coaches would head back to the lab and start to face up the elements. But it was sort of this really exciting space for the students to actually work really closely with entrepreneurs and actually help be really helpful in the designers and entrepreneurs' own creative process and iterating and making better in their product. And so this was one of the projects the students came up with, which was this hexapod using their linear actuators that would sort of just crawl around the space, and would be equipped with an iPhone that would actually stream what the hexapod was seeing. And then we also do a lot of work kind of combining fashion and technology. And we've had an ongoing partnership with Emerging Trends Show at Boston Fashion Week, and it's been a really exciting project that we've been working on. So for the past 2 years, we've actually had NuVu collection, which featured about 5 different outfits. And really sort of looking at the merger of using technology and the use of like laser cutters and again 3D printing in the space of fashion. So all of these pieces sort of have elements utilizing this technology, and it's been like a big hit actually on the runway. And I think people are generally very surprised to learn that these are the excellent students are doing this all the work. But you can see that they're very sort of bold, which is always fun. And so this whole theme was called Nature Tech. So bringing in natural elements and sort of how this can be reinterpreted for wearables. And then last Lastly, every now and then we also have studios which look at kind of the bigger global issues. And this was a very exciting studio that we did, where we had actually quite a few students involved in the studio, which was a studio called Brighton City. And it was a 4-week studio, most of our studios are 2 week long. But this was a 4-week studio, and we spent a week sort of doing research on how the city of Rio was changing with the upcoming World Cup and Olympic Games. And after that, we actually spent 2 weeks on site, traveling in the city of Rio to understand how the favelas and the city was changing with the approach to these big mega events. And the students learned a lot. After that, we came back meeting and spent about a week and a half designing projects and innovative projects that were really directly related to sort of the big problems that they had observed. So for instance, one of the projects was to actually design an app that would actually help residents who were shifting from either the favelas or were being forced out and evicted to move to a different area, and how much value could they get for their home, and how much would it cost to actually move to new neighborhoods. A lot of information which is not really easily available, and create a really simple app that could be useful to people and residents. So these are the types of things, and you can see the level of sort of inquiry, research work, and then bringing all of that information, knowledge, and sort of dissecting it to understand what are the sort of the key problems, and how can I actually devise an innovative solution. So really, that's kind of our, what keeps us, I think, why we're here. It's been 4 years, and it's still been very exciting, because there's so much interesting stuff to kind of look at in the world. And we've seen that students, especially at the middle and high school range, sort of are very open, and they are very imaginative, and that coupled with good mentorship can actually lead them to actually kind of solve big problems, and in the process actually learn a lot about what creative thinking is, and problem solving, and learn to create critical thinking skills. So thank you for your time, and I'd like to open it up for some Q&A or any questions you want to have.
And also, you want to stand up here?
Bob McDonald, I'm a math department, work with sciences here too, and I've been a NuVu faculty liaison from day one.
I'm Rebecca Roberts. I'm a visual arts teacher and head of the visual arts department, and this is my first year as a liaison. I spent some time working with you and talking to kids about experience
You mentioned that you're people from industry come in to be sort of mentors. I don't know where 2 weeks into or whatever. How do you know that they are going to be good mentors?
Yeah, very good question. So now that it's our whole year, I think we're better at also identifying our coaches and the skills that the coach needs to actually lead a studio in this sort of context, which is very open-ended. And so I'd say about from our portfolio of coaches, about 65 to 70% are repeat coaches. So they'll come for a 2-week period, one trimester, and then another student the following trimester. So we've actually kind of been working pretty closely with them. We understand how they work within that studio context. And then for the other 30% who are sort of our new coaches, we actually spend a lot of time, even before they start the studio, coaching the coaches on what to expect, and actually designing the studio itself in what we hope will run in a pretty successful and fluid way. But there is a little bit of a risk in the sense that they're not trained necessarily to work with students, so there's certain advantages and disadvantages that are always there. But what they're very good at is, because that sort of creative process in many cases is natural to them, and they're working in an industry which requires them to think outside of the box and to think on their toes, and that is sort of kind of our ideal coach, who's able to kind of guide students along that process and not get stuck themselves, and also to offer that level of support. And in case there's something that students are researching that they don't know, designing or building something, usually what happens is the coach is aligned to something who can come and help out tomorrow, or give students feedback, and they'll come for an hour the next day, they'll bring in their friends. So it's a huge, huge resource in the sense of, again, in the context of the way that we structure our studios. Every now and then we'll get a coach who just, is in a great match. And either, we have enough of our sort of support team, our core team there, who will always kind of be available and might jump into the studio to help support that studio, or in case where sometimes they just need extra help, which sometimes happens. So we always have sort of our team as a fluid team, and sometimes we'll come in, we'll end up coaching half the time or on. But in many cases, so far, we've had a pretty, I'd say about, 98% of the time, there's a good number of coaches. It's that 2% that we're always like, okay, that didn't quite work out. But, I think the students also know that they're there for a long period of time. And so part of their whole experience is also learning about, how different fields work.
So they'll see 4 different coaches.
They will, or more. We sometimes have anywhere from, it could be 1 to sometimes 5 coaches per student, depending on, the complexity of what it is that we're doing. For a lot of sort of our robotics, engineering, industrial design studios, we usually have a minimum of 4 coaches, or a group size of about 10. And that's because sometimes they require engineering expertise. Sometimes they're looking for help in the design process and how to make something, how to model something in 3D modeling programs such as Rhino. So all of these sort of different skill sets become very important. Even in the robotics studio, someone who knows how to program and be able to work on the technical side. So there's a lot of pieces that come together. And we try and have our team is actually a pretty diverse team just for that reason. I come from an architecture design background. David, our co-founder, comes from an AI background and has got a master's in mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and is a fantastic programmer. So all of these skill sets become really important in the context of the studio environment.
Do the students pick the projects that they work on, or are they just sort of going to do it, how many choices are there time?
Yeah, so what we do is every 2 weeks we have about 2 to 3 studios which are running simultaneously, and they don't repeat, the studios don't repeat. But what happens is within that studio, like a particular studio topic. So for instance, we had a studio called Do-It-Yourself Prosthetics, Hand Prosthetics. And the students had to design, and they were actually looking at an open source prosthetics piece that could be 3D printed. And they were actually looking to take that design, hack into it, and then create a different project with a different set of functions. And so the different student teams actually split apart, and they brainstormed a bunch of ideas for different types of prosthetics. So one team was really interested in sports, for instance. And they actually wanted to take that prosthetics and see how it could be fit in the context of someone who might be playing baseball who didn't have a part of their hand. So their whole project was geared around that central idea. So usually what happens is there's a broad studio topic, and within that, the students actually generate ideas. And again, with a lot of feedback from their coaches and from their peers. And they focus on that idea then for the rest of the studio. So it's really, then that's kind of our aim is to get students motivated and excited, and their excitement usually comes with knowing that it's an idea that they really love and are passionate about, and hopefully that's enough to kind of take them through the 2 weeks of rigorous sort of brainstorming and prototyping and all the failure that they'll encounter through that process. And so yes, the ideas do come from the students.
How do you choose the themes each semester, and how do you keep the sort of rigor of the different projects from semester to semester?
Yeah, so the themes we spend time for probably the academic year begins, and we usually try and find sort of interesting, broad-ranging themes, and that lend themselves to a bunch of TV studios. So, for instance, we just finished up a trimester, our current trimester was really around health, and this is where the do-it-yourself prosthetics studio came to be. So it's usually what's kind of relevant, what are the interesting themes, and if we can find that sort of material in TV studios to focus on. So that's how our thinking process ends up going. As far as the TV studios, it's a combination of us, the core team designing the curriculum, and also coaches who might have a particular interest in a certain type of studio topic. We don't have a coach that comes to us and say, hey, I want to design, I want to work on a studio for some around designing television robot, or design daily studios that focus on modular housing. So we have, there's sort of back and forth that happens between us and also our coaches and teams. As far as the rigor aspect, that's where we kind of as a core team, we're always sort of peeking into the studios, observing, especially with the new coaches, just to make sure that things are running smoothly, there's that level of sort of critical engagement, that the students aren't sort of slacking at any point in time. The coach is also, very, very actively involved in feedback to the students. So we sort of are still very involved in the studios. The space is not that large, so it's about 4,000 square foot space, and our kind of office areas in the middle. But we're basically at the studios most of the day in the series. So we try and make sure that, again, the consistency is there from studio to studio. And for us, again, it's making sure that all the students are engaged. And if you ever see an instance of students just not working or not doing so well, we'll try and first meet with the coach to understand what's going on, and also meet with the student to understand it's not of interest, if you're struggling for some reason, if the group dynamic is not working, so there's a lot of factors that could play into that. So we try to understand what's going on. But really, for us, it's sort of our core team making sure that we have a high level of engagement across the single studio. And I think we have pretty high standards too from what we expect as far as the level of work. Our measure is always, whatever gets produced, the combination of both process and product that we're focusing on, and the product has to be at the level that you would want to show in sort of any professional environment. It should never seem like, hey, a middle school student designed or a high school student designed it. And that's a good base measure for us.
I've seen that right now next year. Are these already technically announced for the next year?
Not yet. So we have up until the end of this year. So right now we have Word Health, our next semester, our next will be Home of the Future, and then our summer's fantasy. But we haven't got to next year. We'll probably decide that in the next probably month. And part of it is the themes are always interesting and relevant, but at the end of the day, even if you ask any of our alumni, it's really sort of irrelevant what the theme is. I think really that, again, going back to that, the central focus is always students kind of understanding that they have a better understanding of the creative process and how they approach equipment problems. And regardless of the studio topic, it's really going back to that main element. And so for them, a lot of them they won't be able to differentiate whether I was part of the food theme term or if I was part of the design for development. They're just different kind of questions that come to play. But the process is very similar.
Do you find any difference in terms of student satisfaction or feeling success with the project if a student comes more from an art or design or social science type emphasis versus the robotics, engineering, computer programming type background or interest?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for both sets of students and everything in between and nothing, they all kind of are very challenged in one way or another because of the nature of the studios and these are so multidisciplinary that, we might even have, again, a robotics type of studio, but we never compromise on the elements of design. And vice versa. If there's a more design-heavy studio, understanding the technology piece so that it's so fluid that you don't forget that it's there, it's just as important. And so you'll see that students who might be really, really great in the social sciences, the design, they might struggle initially with maybe the technology and engineering piece, but what our role is usually, guiding the students and actually, we sometimes actually get them to try things which are outside of their comfort zone. So they'll go between kind of a more design studio and then more of a technology engineering studio, and then go back to doing some more kind of visual arts and kind of storytelling based. And so they're constantly going back and forth. So we make sure that they also don't stick to the comfort of their base. This is sort of their time to try something new. And a lot of them, there's actually quite a few of them who will say that I think a lot of their college decisions, became sort of more clear through going through NuVu and saying and understanding, okay, this is what this field is about. It's a little confused. We've had students who've done filmmaking studios who've been really excited about multimedia colleges, and And we've heard that a lot. Come back with her and come back and said that this was sort of really, this was an interesting time for me to explore these things and find my passion. And also realize that sometimes what they're really passionate about, they might never have tried it until that moment. So we try and encourage them to kind of use this time to try new things, to get outside of your comfort zone, what you kind of feel like you should be doing all the time. And if they hit, it's only 2% of their time. It's not a big deal, and they move on to something new.
Do you have an open house that you can bring kids over?
Yes, we actually have an exhibit coming up, which is going to be on March 9th, Sunday, from 10 to 12. And that's an open exhibit, and we're excited this year. We always host it at our studio, but we're in a building which is actually shared by the Central Square Theater, so we're actually going to be having most of the programming in the theater space, so it will be a black space. But it's an open exhibit, it's a public exhibit, so we invite you to come, and there's a lot of families and kids there. And so yeah, it'll give you a good snapshot of at least the types of projects that the students work on. You'll hear the students themselves speaking and get a pretty good idea from their perspective what they've done. It won't give you, the sense of what's, day-to-day life is like in the studio, but it will still give you a pretty good idea of, how the studio works and the students thinking behind all of the projects.
How do you find that the Beaver students interact with the other students there? So we started Project as Beaver, most of Beaver kids, and now I know there's a lot of other schools that are participating.
It's interesting. It's definitely where we want to get, I think even for the Beaver students, it's exciting for them to finally, if they're having fun off, it's always like an exchange. And being around Beaver students, first of all, I think they're looking for a new type of experience too. Sometimes it is, I think when I was younger, it was definitely predominantly Beaver. It was, you definitely feel that it was a Beaver thing. But I think for them, it's really exciting to actually now there's about, teams to come from other schools. And for them, they can meet friendships outside of the Beaver community. Even for the Beaver students, sometimes there's students that they never talked to, even though they're in the same grade or not in the same grade. So we also have different grade levels in our program, and even for Beaver students who come, there's 10th graders, 11th graders, 12th graders. So there's different social circles they might want to interact. So it's also connected to the person that they're actually meeting. And it's a small community at the end of the day, so everyone gets to know each other very well. So I think for them, it's a really positive experience to actually meet students from other places and even within their school. So they've actually, I think, liked the fact that it's kind of grown and there's more students from other areas. I think they also love kind of being away from Beaver for a trimester and being a little bit more independent and doing their own thing, going off for lunch and then. So I think from there, so we still hear from them as well. So I think they enjoy the diversity there.
Based on feedback from students and coaches, what changes, if any, have you made over the years in the program?
In the program, I would say probably the level of, quality of the projects, and part of it has been us understanding better the types of tools and equipment we might need. We also started off with in-house fancy things like laser cutters and 3D printers, and so a lot of the projects were kind of very rough, which was fantastic because it was really our first time space that looked like hacker space, and it sort of had that quality to it. Now it's still there, but you can see that the projects are a lot more refined, and we're able to be a lot more detail conscious, and it's also helped kind of the iteration process for the students themselves because they can, design something in Rhino or SketchUp and take it to the laser cutter and print it, or cut it, and it takes about a few minutes, and they can assemble those pieces. And so having that level, that quick turnaround means that the coaches are able to quickly also give them feedback, what's working, what's not. And so it's sort of helped kind of support this culture of trying and testing and getting feedback. So that's been one of the big, I think, big changes. The second piece is, having sort of our veteran coaches definitely makes our life a lot easier. Before it was, every time that's where we can get new coaches, new studios together, but now we sort of have our set team of consistent coaches. And that's very helpful because they know the process, and they also then are excited to kind of try new things. We've always been kind of left room for studios which are experimental, where we have, more or less, we don't really know what's going to happen, what's going to be the outcome. We just finished a studio called Interactive Concerts, where we had a music composer chef that had represented NC, and who's actually rose to fame on YouTube, and he wants to actually take his concert series, which is coming up, and make it more interactive. So the audience can engage in different types of technologies. And so the idea was very open-ended, and we had no idea which direction things would head. And that's really exciting, and I think as long as, for the students, they also know that we don't have expectations about the end product, and this is definitely going to be a process. So realize that things might go along smoothly, things might not, and they're part of that process. So we kind of leave some room for those really open-ended collaborations, and I think we're doing that more and more now that we feel a little bit more comfortable with our set of studios and our program. So that's changed as well.
Can you give us some guidance on what age, like what year these kids have to go, what's the semester, and what flows with the academics?
Yeah, it's been 10th, 11th, and 12th, and there's really not one right year, one right term. We definitely don't want students going during a term when they're going to be playing a varsity sport and have lots of away games that they can play with the schedule. I think junior year has probably been slightly more popular than sophomore and senior, but it really is an individual decision for kids. Each time I have a talk with students about when they should go, different factors come up. Some students feel like they want to use NuVu, like someone was saying, as a chance to figure out what their passions are. Other students wait until they've got a sense of what they're really excited about and use NuVu as a chance to dive deeper into those areas. So there's really not one right answer.
So they apply once, and then we work with them to solve them.
And reapply for years if needed. Usually we can make it work. Sometimes we put together a schedule and the student says, you know what, I'm not really thrilled with those 3 hours, I'm going to wait till next year. But there's no hard run apply.
It's a question you're asking is, if we're not sure we're going to apply for next year, so that we still apply now and then have that discussion and say, that's not right, and then we reapply next year, or we just apply and shoot and just target.
You reapply each year, and like I said, if you drop out of the program and say, you know what, next year's not right for us, no harm done. We always have a long wait list. So.
Okay, so it's reflect, but it's good to have a discussion with you just to see if there's a match, time, and maturity.
And advisors, I recommend talking with the students' advisor to often give some advice about which term might be the ideal term. So I definitely include advisors in the loop as new families are discussing.
I just want to piggyback on that a lot of times kids will sign up and we have a pretty substantial wait list, and we do pull off of our wait list. So if your child is really psyched about doing NuVu a particular year and they got on the wait list, it doesn't necessarily mean they won't get off the wait list. Schedule changes, different decisions get made. So I just don't want you to get super discouraged if this is like you have your heart set. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but at the same time we do pull people off. Even sometimes every once in a while there's a switch during the school year, so he decides something different every once in a while there's a shift. And then also senior year, they don't do it in the spring, it's either the fall or the winter, but we don't do it senior spring.
Yeah, that's a very separate program altogether. It's more of an independent program. Our focus is on actually help facilitate studios and work with student teams, having kind of the knowledge that they had going through the experience themselves, and now being sort of a peer mentor. So yeah, we have a pretty substantial, say about 8 to 10 students come back our interns in the summer.
Come to Beaver and then they transported for Beaver there.
Yes, there's lots that run from between Beaver and NuVu in the morning and in the afternoon. And so most students do that, they come here and take the bus, but depending on where you live and what your morning looks like, some students arrive on their own, a T or a drop-off.
So that they come back for after school activities.
Yeah, one of the questions within your team, yeah, we're right off the red line, the San Jose first. So it's pretty convenient, and right on that side for
Just on the afternoon activities, one thing that they can't really do is play a swimming degree because of all your dismissal, particularly in the fall season, was a big start, and so it becomes really problematic, particularly if they are 6 or 8. So that's
Yes. So you have that part of the application, what sort?
what journal?
You can be involved with theater, you can be involved with live, you can be involved with pretty much anything that doesn't involve really dismissals and travel.
What's the formal process that it takes to feedback?
So there's a few ways. So we're constantly, number one, getting feedback from the coaches. From the students themselves, we try to meet kind of individually with the students. It's not so much a formal process, but we are pretty consistently communicating with the students. And how are they doing? How's this studio? And really get to see their progress. And through these desk grids and through the weekly or bi-weekly reviews that we have. But we have a pretty good insight into how the students are doing, just from the coaches and from us, just kind of keeping into the studios every day, as far as how the students engage or not. And then we've actually started to try and implement more of a student feedback process as well. That we haven't after kind of the first 2 studios. So we now have gotten into the really good rhythm of actually getting feedback from the coaches every studio, and giving that feedback back to the students. But now it's going to be kind of also coming back from the students. Because in the past, it's been informal, but also been a good way for the students that they haven't appreciated if they feel comfortable coming up and talking to any one of us or teams that they don't feel comfortable talking to the coach. And so typically, we have a good sense of what's happening, but we are looking to kind of make that process a little bit more formal, whether it's to sort of mid-reviews and check-ins, or we actually dedicate the time for the student to come and talk with us and let us know, what's been their experience so far, what's working, what's not working for them. And usually that comes with the learn of, we see that there's a student who's not particularly engaged, is on their cell phone or distracted with what's really going on, and they usually involve more one-on-one conversation with that.
I hear that there has been some international travel to India and so can you describe a little bit of the process of how that might affect studios and how you're going to deliver the studios and how you integrate it into the schedule?
Yeah, this is a very unique studios, and they both have been slightly different in both contexts, right? The Result Studio is definitely pre-planned in the sense that we were going to do the studio, it was integrated into the trimester, so there was a 4-week sort of block. So instead of taking 2 separate studios, they would be taking one giant block studio. And so we started making preparation even before the start of the trimester, and had an application process for that. In the case of the industry, which happened probably a year before that, the whole process was really a little bit more organic in the sense that we did a 2-week studio that was around designing just sort of collaborative mobile games, and the developing prototypes of those games, and it was about almost, I'd say, 8 months later, yeah, it was about 6 to 8 months later, when we actually took the students for more of a field research testing, on-field testing trip, and research trip to India. So we actually ended up getting the students to actually graduate from NuVu, we were back at Beaver, and kind of scheduling it for the holidays a little bit, and taking them as part of that on-site trip. So that was a very different kind of experience altogether, but we felt, it was a really exciting opportunity for the students to actually see how their games are being designed in the context of a student environment, how kids would actually interact and use those things. So we almost did it retroactively in that instance. So they've both been really kind of interesting kind of examples of sort of our overseas trips. And we always, I think, really get excited by having again sort of a real world project that we're working on, and that kind of lends itself to those types of studios. So, as we're thinking of in the future, we might have another opportunity that might come up, and maybe some partners in those countries that might be interested in partnering with us. So that's how we design those studios. It usually takes a lot of pre-planning and before we can certain on that studio. But I think in the future it will also be sort of in the context of the trimester as well.
What's the evaluation process for the students themselves? At the end of the term, what they actually help them understand the strengths and weaknesses were, what the strengths and weaknesses were, how they perform, what they accomplish.
Yeah, you mean coming from the student's perspective or from?
No, coming from the coaches and the staff.
Assessment.
Assessment.
Yes. So there's a few ways, that we do our overall assessment. First of all, there's, as I was mentioning, there's an online portfolio piece, which is also a really great way for both the coaches and for our core team to understand how the students are progressing and what it is that they're doing from day to day. So every day they're actually documenting their progress. And so if they're designing like the prosthetics piece, every day they'll figure out a mechanical solution for how to operate the fingers. They'll go and they'll take a photograph of that, upload it onto the website, and write something about their design. So every day they're responsible for documenting their progress. And at the end of the 2 weeks, they basically take all of that and produce a portfolio piece, which is a much more refined version of the process and intent, and that gets that becomes part of the online portfolio, which then to go back to the bigger piece at the end of the trimester, the core team we actually write a written evaluation, which gets sent to Beaver and the families, which is part of their transcript. And along with that written evaluation, we actually even include a link to their online portfolio, so that gets sent to colleges as they apply for internships and so forth. So and that's a big piece, I think, for us, because we don't have grades for the pass or pass system, and particularly because for us it's encouraging students again to try new things, to not fear testing a prototype to see in which direction will head. It's not necessarily about A, B, C, D, or E. It's really about seeing the growth also of the student in terms of their critical thinking abilities and their problem-solving abilities, how they work in a team. So all of that is very qualitative, and we try and see that across different studios. And there are different studios that some students might be really fantastic that we struggle, but it's a good struggle, and so we encourage that piece. So for us, again, I think what's been a really, a really great measure has been the portfolio and students' own reflection, and that independent project period, and it's also really interesting because sometimes you'll have students who, they haven't quite put the pieces together, and then during that independent project period, they'll just shine. I don't know what happens, maybe because they realize at the end, and they want to do something, and that is, about them. And I know we had one student who ended up doing a documentary about his basketball career. And it was amazing. I mean, he had taken filmmaking class and just like loved it. And the last week he gathered a team and they produced this about 8 to 10 minute short documentary. And it was fantastic to kind of see that level of like self-direction and excitement about doing something. So that's also a good space for us to kind of understand and for the students to reflect on what's happened in the past 9 months. So yes, that's how our assessment.
Patty, actually, you can find that documentary on our website.
Oh, thanks.
There was a question there, I think we have to shift to question and answer. Okay. So now, it's almost time to you guys to talk about the registration process and all that. Working on maybe the process to do something.
So there's an online application that will go to the students, and it's not due until just before spring break. It probably takes 10 to 15 minutes to fill out. Shouldn't feel painful. It's not as if we're asking them to write an essay at college. But we do want to get a sense of what timing might fit well for them. Some questions to get them thinking about the kind of work that goes into NuVu, but it shouldn't be painful. If in the course of that process some questions come up, you want to check in with either of us, feel free, we're definitely available. Email is probably the easiest. But not until just before spring break.
Thanks, everybody.